society and a culture said, hey, these are achievements that will make you happy. And I found myself at the end of the day unhappy. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to the jungle and get healed, feel better, find the mysteries of life, or die trying. I remember thinking at the time as I'm in there, I'm like, wow, I just got kind of wormholed into a reality that's more real than the reality I just came from. And I think of it like at some point you feel like you're a human having a spiritual experience, and then eventually you feel like you're an eternal soul having a human experience. And once you can actually make that shift, that's really the shift in awakening. I think a lot of folks are being called to awaken to their soul nature, to their soul motivation. And a big chunk of that is to enhearten yourself, right? Bring yourself back into your heart. I'm talking about your spiritual heart. People are like, why are you doing all this stuff? I'm like, well, you just feel better. You're gonna feel better no matter what's happening.
Hello and welcome to Soul Unique. I am Anu Peter. My goal with Soul Unique is to assist you in uncovering, forging, and navigating your own personal spiritual path by sharing the very personal stories of inspiring individuals from all walks of life who are on their own unique spiritual journeys. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Soul Unique. My guest today is my good friend. You could say he's pretty much like my soul brother, with whom I have shared much of my spiritual journey in the last decade or so, Kevin Dodson. Kevin is an intrepid spiritual practitioner and facilitator, and he is the visionary founder and minister shaman of an Ayahuasca church. But before we begin, I want to be sure you know that, as is the case with every episode of Soul Unique, if anything is mentioned during the episode that you'd like to know more about, just go to soulunique.com for more information on the topics that are discussed. I also have links to any resources that were mentioned in the episode, and you can find all of that for free at soulunique.com. And while you're there, please sign up for my mailing list. And now moving on to my guest, Kevin Dodson is what I would call an intrepid, multidimensional spiritual traveler, visionary, and an experienced practitioner. He is also the founder and lead minister and shaman of an Ayahuasca church based in Seattle, Washington, called Souls, which stands for the Sanctuary of Universal Love and Service. So with that, I want to say welcome, Brother Kevin.
Thank you, Brother Anu. So good to be here. Boy, I feel like this meeting has been, perhaps lifetimes in coming, but certainly a decade in coming. So we met when, about 10 years ago? I'm trying to place that exactly.
I think it's a little over that. It's like 2012.
2012, yeah.
2013, maybe.
Yeah, 2013, I think. And I even remember back then you had the idea for Soul Unique. You were talking about Soul Unique and how that was your mission, and to see it flowering into this format all those years later, it's very inspiring. So
thank you.
Making that connection this morning. Soul Unique has been around for a long time.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Brother Kevin. So I'd like to begin and propose a sort of overall framework of inquiry for our conversation today, in which we will be reflecting on the nature of reality and the self through the lens of expanded awareness, perhaps even the very real possibility that reality as we know it is just one layer. And in my experiences of ayahuasca and in the many profound experiences of ayahuasca ceremony that I have shared with you, Brother Kevin, I think I can say that we agree that ayahuasca is a profound and powerful tool for transformation, healing, awakening, even experiencing higher states of consciousness. But before we take a dive into the amazing world of what is possible with ayahuasca, let's first touch a bit on your background. And I'd love to just sort of go back into your early spiritual life and see, what was your childhood like? What were you brought up in as far as religious or religion or spirituality? And what was that like for you?
I feel like I grew up as a very traditional, American boy. So I grew up in a small town, the Northwest, and I grew up in a very religious family, a Christian fundamentalist family. And so my very first kind of onboarding into the spiritual life was through the lens of fundamentalist Christianity, which, as we know, is very dogmatic, very dualistic, right? You have a God above you, and then your job here is to serve him. And there's obviously a whole host of historical precedent, and you have a book called the Bible, which is the way God is talking to you. And it all seemed very scary, right? The idea of, you have one shot, it's you're up or down. You either go to heaven or hell. And the rules by which you have to live your life are, Iron Age, kind of written down text from Iron Age, different culture. So it's a very confusing kind of place to grow up. So through a lot of confusion, I ended up when I was maybe 15, 16, 17 time frame, just kind of chucked the whole thing and became basically an atheist, I think.
Oh, wow.
I still had a lot of fear, right? There was a lot of residual, like if you grow up in a very high control religion like that, there's this, you're programmed from a very young age. So you're conditioned to kind of live in fear that you're not following the rules, that your mortal soul is in danger, etc. So I just kind of cast it all off. And then I didn't come back into any kind of spiritual pursuit until my early 30s. And, uh, I was living my life, doing fine, career, profession, that kind of thing. And then my sister-in-law, I remember, used to go see an intuitive angel reader. And she would go see this reader and come back. Um, and she would, find it very helpful. And of course, I would mock her mercilessly, for doing that. And then finally one day she was like, "Hey, listen, I'll pay for you to go talk to this woman as long as you promise to give it a fair shake." This woman's name was Verna Parker. She was an elderly woman, very plugged in, as I know now. She has since transitioned, not around anymore, but so I went to go see her, and I was just blown away by the amount of information that she knew, that she was tapping into the field, and she was really reading me quite well and gave me a lot of very useful information. And so I
Wow.
remember leaving that session being like, I think my world, like the paradigm of my world just changed. I'm not sure how, but there's no way that she could have done, what she did without there being some other kind of field or some other information source she was tapping into. So that really began my real spiritual life. So early 30s. So I'm 57 now. So it was almost 30 years ago. And that was kind of, when was that? That would have been in the 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And it's funny to say, but I guess we're old enough now to say that that was, really before the internet gained traction. And so you didn't really have access to the information you do now, not easy to get a hold of. So just through trial and error, I tried out a bunch of different kind of new age type spiritual pursuits, began to meditate regularly, meditation retreats, other kind of practices. But still searching, still searching. Never quite found maybe the proof or the experience I was looking for to really convince me that something else was going on. So I was living a very conventional life, still chasing a lot of my egoic desires, money, status, all that stuff, security, comfort. And then at some point, I found myself in my early 40s, super depressed. I'd had a bunch of successes, a bunch of failures, and I could not, pull myself out of this depression that I was in.
Hmm.
And I think of, on a scale of 1 to 10 of the happiness scale, if 1 being suicidal and 10 being, orgasmic bliss. I think for my earlier life, I was hovering anywhere from, I don't know, 3 to 6 most of my life. And then probably during this time, I was around a 2, you know?
Huh.
And it occurred to me that you can't really operate at a 2 on the happiness scale for long before, before things like suicide ideation certainly begin to come into your field.
Huh.
So there I was, and I'd heard about this thing called ayahuasca down in the jungle. I think I read it in an Outside magazine article maybe 5, 6 years earlier, and somehow it stuck with me. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the jungle and get healed, feel better, find the mysteries of life or, die trying kind of thing. So I went down to a beautiful retreat center down out of Iquitos called Niue Rao. They're still active. They're a very traditional Shipibo center. And I was there a couple weeks, did 10 journeys, and it really changed my life. Um, it really, yeah, it really started me on this path. And, uh, I'm currently a minister in a visionary church called Souls Church, which I helped to start about a year and a half ago, January of 2024. And I'm a practicing shaman. And if you would have told me that this is where I would be, 15, 20 years ago, I would have thought, wow, what went horribly wrong in my life that I would end up here? Yeah. Kind of the most fulfilling, thing. And I think on that happiness scale, I hover around, I don't know, probably an 8 these days on the regular. So certainly happier, if not economically, more disadvantaged.
Well, I love that you're high on the happiness scale, but I'd like to back up a little bit and just I'd love for you to share what your path was like in the world of education and
Oh,
your
sure. Yeah,
military experience and what kind of work you were doing when you were out there
sure.
pursuing more egoic desires.
Like I say, I grew up very, very, very American. Played high school football, Republican family. Grew up in this evangelical kind of hot box. And out of high school, I went to West Point, so I got an appointment to West Point, and so I served. I was in West Point for 4 years. Graduated, got commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Army, and then served for 5 years in the Army. But I got my MBA then at Wharton Business School, and was there for a couple years in Philadelphia. At that point, it still is one of the top business schools. So I feel like I have this certain, pedigree, and I was climbing this very, very traditional kind of escalator towards a comfortable life. And then started working for a national consulting firm, doing that. And this is then when I ran into kind of my own spiritual longings, which again kicked off from that experience I spoke about. But had been building of just like, what's the point here? Like, I'm not that happy. Like, I'm working super hard, making a lot of money for the time. I've been doing kind of all of these things that society and the culture said, hey, these are achievements that will make you happy. And I found myself, at the end of the day, unhappy, right?
Mm.
I was not, again, the scale of 1 to 10, I was around, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. Now, people can be very successful who are unhappy. In fact, it drives them, right? So the workaholism, right, is just another addiction. But I'm lucky in that I'm, not driven towards alcoholism or drug addiction, but certainly workaholism. And if you're going to be addicted to anything, that's probably the best thing, right? Because at least you have a nice car and a roof over your head. Yeah. So that kind of took me into my early 30s, and that's where my spiritual pursuit began. Of course, that was the same time the internet showed up, and so then I jumped headfirst into Silicon Valley, kind of internet businesses, and did a bunch of startups, worked for some internet agencies, and really lived that game. So I started doing this full time about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, just right before the pandemic. And so I'm a full time, practicing shaman now. But before that, I was just like kind of grinding away in the corporate world of Silicon Valley for about 20 years.
I would love to back up and now go back to your experience in Peru with your
Sure.
first experience of ayahuasca. So I imagine this is like early 2000s,
Yeah. No,
2007.
this was 2012. Yeah.
Okay, so right before we met then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know, I mean, haven't heard about it for a while, but when we first met, you came to a group that I was facilitating,
Yeah.
an out of body experience group that met once a
Yeah.
month,
Yeah.
and you came and you blew us all away sharing the story of your experience in that ayahuasca journey, or one of the ones that you had in Peru. And I'd love if you could share
Sure.
somewhat concisely some of that experience.
Sure. So, yeah, so I went down there again, kind of a Hail Mary to say, well, looks like an adventure. And I was with a nice group of people, and didn't really know what to expect. But I think I approached it from a very typical Western mindset of, very scientific materialist, which is like, okay, you take this chemical substance and it messes with the kind of your brain chemistry, makes the neurons fire funky. Something happens in the neurobiology, and then you see you hallucinate, and somehow that's supposed to be helpful, kind of in your spiritual path, or supposed to heal you or whatever. So I was like, well, okay, seems a little outlandish, but I'm game. So that was the mindset that I approached. You go down there, and then once you actually take ayahuasca, you're starting your journey. It became, as I dropped into the journey, it was it was clear immediately that that is not what was going on. Like there, like you are like, okay, this is a completely different experience I'm having. I remember thinking at the time as I'm in there, I'm like, wow, I just got kind of wormholed into a reality that's more real than the reality I just came from.
Hmm.
Like, so I think of it as like ultra reality. Um, and I've since come to understand that it's just the expanded, once you are able to shed the kind of really constrictions of space time that we are in, right, in this reality frame, and you enter a more expanded reality frame, you just have access to higher dimensions, more dimensions of reality, let's say. And talking about this stuff and forming thought models and ideas and concepts and feelings around what's actually going on here is just super helpful to the human part of ourselves. Like the soul knows what's going on, but the human takes a lot of comfort, right, in just understanding this bigger context. So it's relative truth that I think is helpful to orient yourself uh, to how to behave while you're here. It helps to satisfy kind of the mind's wanting to understand why we're here, and it helps to give you some comfort as to where we're going to go. You know, and those three things, I think, any kind of spiritual idea, philosophy, maybe religion, you could say, like why are we here? How do you behave while we're here? And then where do you go when you die? Are kind of the three pillars of any real spiritual or religious belief.
I love that. Those three questions have been key for me in my life, really since childhood. Where was I before I was in this body? Why am I here? And where do I go afterwards? And I also love what you talked about, that it's like there's a saying about the signpost pointing to the moon is not the moon,
Yeah.
but of course we need the signpost so we can find it. So a lot of this,
The finger pointing to the flower of life here that's framing my head.
yeah, that's your halo.
Yeah, my halo. Nice. I like it.
Are you willing to talk a little about your personal experience in that powerful journey? I think I recall that you had a visitation with your mother.
Yeah, yeah, I can talk about a couple, highlights that might be interesting. But so the very first journey I had down there, again, I was a little skeptical too, because I'm kind of at least at that time, super rational guy in my head. And I'm just like, yeah, let me see what you got. So anyway, I drop in immediately, and I was very taken aback by the experience. Like I said, and even people say, well, how do you know you weren't just hallucinating that? And I kind of think about it like, well, how do you know when you wake up from a nap? Like you're in a dream, and the dream, while you're in the dream, it seems very real, but then you wake up, and this awakened reality we're in right now seems clearer, seems more consistent. It has qualities to it that are more durable than the dream state. Well, I think of that, the states sometimes you get into doing the sacrament, um, they seem more real than this world does, right? And then when you're kind of coming back here and recombobulating your human self, you're like, oh yeah, this is like a slowed down, kind of dumbed down version of that greater reality. So I get launched into this greater reality, and the first thing that happens is my mother showed up. Now she had died maybe 5 years earlier ish, something like that. Um, Died in her mid-60s, had a couple-year bout with cancer, and it became and she showed up in my journey, and she was a little bit lost, and it was just an incredible thing. Like she looked like she was mid-30s, and she was kind of stuck. The way that I was understanding it is she hadn't transitioned properly, right? And she had a lot of, I think, guilt. Again, she had this Christian ideology, and I think at some level she was very fearful about moving on, which is super sad. One of the biggest issues of our culture is we don't have a super positive cosmology about dying and moving on, right? People don't look forward to transitioning because of this up-down kind of ideology that permeates the culture. Everybody's worried about the kind of up-down, you know? So
Mm.
anyway, she had a lot of fear when she died. Unfortunately, she passed on. But anyway, she was kind of stuck, at least it appeared to me. And we talked and we had a conversation about a lot of things that happened as a child and a lot of apologizing both ways and just kind of mending of our relationship. And then she was still there. And then I remember that then, the spirit of ayahuasca was like, okay, you need to help her move on, help her transition. And I was very much like, well, what does that even mean? And then at that point, I would say like another portal opened up and I could see through this portal into what looked like an old, like it was one of those old paddle, like Mississippi paddle boats kind of a thing, Mississippi Queen, it was there and I
Huh.
could see my grandfather and my grandmother and my great aunt, my great uncle, right? Who would be her father, mother, and uncle were there. And they were just waving her across. They're like, come on. It's going to make me cry just thinking about it. They were like, come on, Janie, come across, come
Mhm.
across. And then she was like, oh, and then she kind of walked into kind of up the gangplank and joined her family. And then
Oh,
I kind of waved and the portal closed. And that was my first experience of seeing kind of the other side through a portal like that. It's since
Wow.
happened quite a bit in my work, but that time. And then, then I kind of came out of the experience and I was so blown away by it. Like I didn't realize how much kind of heavy my heart was from the death of my mother. I hadn't processed that information. I hadn't processed that at all. Like any good, particularly male, right, raised in America, you're really raised to deny any of your feelings, right? You just cut your heart off. Plus all my military training, all that stuff. I was just very disheartened. And having that experience helped me to understand, man, your heart is so closed. And the reason that you're so depressed and so anxious is because you're not feeling anything, right?
hmm.
You're not processing any of these feelings that have been building up in your system for the last, 40 years. So a lot of my early work then with our sacrament was really around opening up these channels of my energetic channels so I could actually feel again, right? Feel deeply and process all of the shadow, the trauma stuff that had been in my system that I had not dealt with.
Huh.
Yeah. So, but at this point between my own journeying and my work as a shaman, I don't know, done 500-600 journeys at this point. And so uh a lot of, as we know, doing this work, you have a lot of just indescribable experiences, kind of incredible things, but they're really all in service to me, of my own awakening, right? My own, at least that's the word we use. In fact, even the mission of the church, right, is to assist all beings in awakening to their divine nature
Of
through
your church.
of Soul's Church, yeah, through
Yeah.
direct spiritual experience. And I feel like that's what the medicine, that's what Mother Ayahuasca has done for me, is to help me to really see my divine nature, to help me understand my soul and to become more ensouled, right? To actually, I think of that kind of transition from being egoically motivated or ego motivated to being soul motivated. There's some paradigm stuff built into that, right? But certainly I think once you take an ayahuasca journey, it's clear that your human self, your ego, is not really what you are, right? There's certainly other ways of getting there, meditation, other practices that you can understand that your thoughts and your feelings and your egoic identity is not your true self. But I think uh, these plant medicines, these visionary journeys are such a good way at really understanding that you are, in fact, a piece of loving awareness, for lack of a better word. Like you are loving awareness, and then you're coming in here and taking human form. So a lot of what we're doing here in this playground, it really is to allow our souls, our soul energy, our soul power, our light bodies, whatever your term you're using, to come in and to begin to move the levers of our incarnation, right? So I think when we're kind of young young humans, we come in, it takes a while for the soul to get the hang of what it means to be human. It takes a while. And so the ego, the way I envision it, is the ego really is running the show for a long time, many, many lives, until at some point you reach a life when the soul is ready to percolate up and begin to be more present. And that whole process is a process of awakening. And at some
Mm.
point, then I think the paradigm, like your understanding of what's happening here begins to shift. And I think of it like, the saying of it, at some point you feel like you're a human having a spiritual experience, right? And then eventually you feel like you're an eternal soul, having a human experience. And once you can actually make that shift, that's really the shift in awakening. And then you begin to view your life as a whole different thing, right? You see it in the context of a greater kind of soul evolution, right? You see the connections between all those people in your life, right? And why they're there and how you can help them. And it also begins to move you more into an orientation of service, right? Clearly an orientation of love and of compassion, kindness, all these things, because you're seeing the bigger picture. And then very much an orientation of service, which I think you and I have traversed that path, and here we are, trying to be of service in the way that our soul is showing up. That's the soul's arc.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of this. I mean, you're really giving a beautiful framework for sort of a life or the cosmology or trajectory of life from a soul's perspective. And I love how you use the term ensouled, which I'm assuming you mean is like connecting with the higher self and or the soul self and bringing that into the here and now to our present awareness.
Yeah, exactly,
Is
exactly.
okay.
One of the, I think, ills of our current culture, like whatever we're doing here in the American culture we've created, a culture of consumerism, um, culture of ego broadly, it's really it's really unensouling people, or it's disheartening people, right? Disheartening people. So, and just take a look at the current political landscape. Like, it's never been meaner. It's never been uh like, vast millions, tens of millions of people kind of rejoicing in the creation of human misery for a whole other class of people. Um, where's that coming from? Well, the culture is just kind of a bit rotten right now. And the rot is really around the focus on the desires and the motivations of the ego. And so I think a lot of folks are being called to awaken to their soul nature, to their soul motivation, and help to fight kind of this rot that currently exists. And a big chunk of that is to enhearten yourself, right? Bring yourself back into your heart. I'm talking about your spiritual heart, right? Folks who aren't familiar with this, you have your chakra system, let's say, of your major chakra points, and your heart chakra is the main one, is a main one. And this is how you bring in love into your system, universal love, which can become human, kind of the emotion of love, but it's a bit of a higher vibration than that. And once, this is open, you have a direct line to your own higher self, right? Much better information coming in from into your field than just the information coming from your human mind, right? So the soul and the enheartened, like your enheartened body, that your energy system that you're bringing your soul in through, just has such better information about how to live and operate in your life.
Hmm.
And this is the real benefit of this work. Like, ultimately, people are like, why are you doing all this stuff? I'm like, well, you just feel better. Like, you're going to operate as a human and you're going to feel better no matter what's happening. Does your life get better? I don't know. Like, this is like a big challenging video games, right? Ups and downs constantly. But once your soul is back and like your energy system is working properly, you're just so much more able to metabolize all of the things coming at you, and you're able to maintain that open-heartedness and flow in that good feeling, that love that really, I think, is the basis of all good feeling as a human being. So that's the payoff. If you need a payoff, that's the payoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like even though life keeps lifing, like you said, with its ups and downs, we're given this access to this new, broader perspective and understanding about what it's all about and how to hold it and how to approach things in a way that actually works and makes sense within the sort of paradigm that we exist.
Mm, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, and I also like what you touched on about how, our it feels to me like what's going on in our world right now is like the last attempt, or hopefully the last attempt, of egoic humanity's perspective trying to assert itself and
Yeah,
hold on to that worldview, which is bound to collapse sooner or later. It has to, because that is not the truth of who and what we really are. But at the same time, because of the challenges that are coming up, I believe that it's also waking up more and more people, because more and more people are going, what is this? What's going on? What's this all about? And it's propelling them out of complacency and comfort to say, okay, I need to kind of figure this out, or I need to take steps into a bigger understanding of what's really going on here.
yeah.
Um,
You know what
yeah,
I think of, doing this work, again, takes you out of the immediate kind of motivations of the ego, status, comfort, you know, happiness, whatever the ego's going after. And you begin
competition.
competition, all this stuff, hierarchy, et cetera. And you begin to see this larger perspective, right? The soul's view is, oh, I see the kind of wheel of life that we're on. I see the multiple past lifetimes and future lifetimes. You just have a better sense of how that's working out. And as I've been kind of in my own journeying, I'm just recognizing that a lot of light beings, which we call light beings or light workers, relatively highly evolved consciousness, cosmic beings have chosen to take human form now over the last, let's say, 80, 60, 70 years, maybe, in order to help with this transition, right? So humanity's facing a bunch of really, I mentioned earlier, this accelerating landscape of technological change. And we really are, less than 10 years, probably closer to 5 years away from creating something like super intelligence, right? Which is AI smarter than us, right? And this is such a pivotal shift, technological shift, that it's going to have, like, the repercussions are kind of unimaginable into humanity. And so we're we're like speeding towards this cliff, uh, as well as advancements in robotics and communications and many energy. All these things are happening very, very quickly. And so in order for us to transition, I think, smoothly into the next phase of humanity, wherever it's going to be, it's going to require us to raise the vibration, right? Raise the level of consciousness, planetary, as a entire planetary system, to be able to navigate this stuff and not have kind of a catastrophic dystopia kind of emerge. So the reason that I think stuff that we're doing, the popularity of a spirituality, of direct spirituality, oftentimes in the form of psychedelics, um, any kind of, like, even this podcast, all this content that's emerging now, people like us, right, who are trying to spread the word, um, it's the tip of the iceberg of the people who are trying to awaken in order to help shift the consciousness through their vibration. And you don't even have to do spiritual work, right? You can do your job as a teacher, as a fireman, as a policeman, whatever. But if you're doing it from a place of consciousness, of enheartedness and ensouledness, you're going to be raising the vibration, right? You're going to be doing it in a way that's helping the collective, not just helping yourself.
Yes, yes, yes.
And if I've learned
Yeah.
anything, well, yeah, preach it, brother. Well, if I've learned anything, it's that, which is we are here to assist the collective, to raise the vibration of the collective. And now we are part of the collective, so we help ourselves as well. But the minute you begin to focus on your own personal egoic desires, motivations, and needs, you begin to kind of drop into your vibration level, and
Mhm.
you then run the risk, I think, of kind of corrupting your energy field. And so the ability, just being conscious you know, of making sure you're behaving and operating out of the soul and in such a way as it supports the elevation of consciousness of all those around you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. Powerful stuff, and important, I think,
Yeah.
for for us as humans to start embracing if we've not done so already, or start taking steps in that direction.
Well,
So let's fast forward a little bit to your present day work with ayahuasca. And I'd like to see if we can sort of demystify the ceremony experience at least a little bit, if at all possible. And can you tell us your perspective with regards to what's called set and setting, creating intentions for one's journey, the importance of working with a skilled facilitator or minister or shaman that you know and can trust, and any other pointers you'd like to offer?
sure. Yeah, that's a small topic. I'll jump into it.
Yeah,
Um,
keep it really short.
yeah. So setting this up, you mentioned set and setting. So anytime you're transitioning from this reality into a higher reality, it's a very significant event. It's a much more significant than people oftentimes give it credit for, right? So, if you're doing psilocybin or something in college to have fun, whatever, you're tripping hard, you're still making that transition, but I don't think people really understand how serious that is, right? So a lot of the set and setting, a lot of what we're doing, focusing on safety, is really setting a very tight, we're calling a very tight container to exist at the bifurcation point between this reality and the next reality, and helping to keep that energetic container very safe, right? Very grounded. And because once you begin to leave the familiar kind of physics of this reality where we have gravity and we have, I'm stuck here as a human and everything. Once you begin to leave that into the higher realms, you know, early on, you don't have a very good way of navigating that reality. And I liken it to being a 5-year-old, let's say, shot. All of a sudden you find yourself in the middle of Times Square, in New York City at like midnight, right? Maybe you find a nice person who helps you, get back home. Maybe you find somebody who, shanghais you or something, or, has some nefarious interest in mind. Like, you just don't know. You're not familiar enough with the surrounding. And so I think a lot of what's happening in the psychedelic use now, and the kind of, not a lot, but some, is that people are getting vaulted into these different experiences, which they're not really prepared for. And they're not protected, and they're not protected enough to have a safe journey. And they come back with all kinds of, I think, energetic connections that aren't serving them. So what we're doing primarily is keeping a very safe container. And oh, by the way, like, this is on the human side, but because we're working with what I've come to understand as a much higher, um, evolved consciousness, a very bodhisattva like consciousness in the form of um, Mother Ayahuasca, right? Who is the plant spirit behind, I think, the technology of the tea. She is creating this container, right? So she has created this technology to help us to evolve, right? To help us to evolve into a higher state of consciousness. And so we're really kind of in her container, but as from the human side of it, we can help to set that up and to orient people correctly so they can have the best journey, right? The best experience they can in a safe environment, not just safe, medically safe, but also energetically safe, emotionally safe and spiritually safe. Sometimes people, especially if in a recreational context, don't really don't set a good set and setting, and then I think you're, again, at risk of, um, when you make that transition from this world into the next, I think you're just at risk of picking up some stuff, and you're at risk of maybe perhaps not even fully coming back.
What do you
So,
mean by picking up some stuff?
yeah, so this is kind of more this is obviously in the metaphysical or the woo-woo side, but, we are consciousness, we're energies, right? And oftentimes within us, we have a lot of energies. And one of the ways we talked about is as protectors, right? You have a lot of protector energies inside of you. Some of these are serving you, perhaps some of these are not. Well, I think once you pop out into the broader expanse, like, okay, you are a soul, you're a consciousness, but there's all kinds of other disembodied things out there. Like, once you, oftentimes when people are, use psychedelics and cross over that boundary, like, you do run into other entities, right? They may be angels, they may be insectoids, they may be look like aliens, they may look like humanoids, like we've all seen. They may look like cartoon characters, like we've all seen stuff out there. They may, what did Terrence McKenna call them? The robot elves. The many, many different things you see out there, and they look very real, and they act very real, and they interact with you very real. And you're forced to be like, oh, sometimes they seem more real than even the humans you interact with here. So it forces you to expand your understanding of what's happening here and your role as a human. And for me, it gives me some idea about even why we take human form, right? We come in here because this is a very tight container. It's a very defined game. Time puts us all in this linear kind of cause and effect. I think we keep incarnating and coming back oftentimes because we'd like to. Like, we like to play this game that we're down here. But there are many other games going on, once you pop out of this one.
So I'm just going to stop you for a second. What would you say to somebody that takes ayahuasca or perhaps psilocybin or something, and they have some sort of experience, but they don't have those particular experiences?
Yeah, I think you have the experience your soul needs to have, right? So oftentimes I work with folks who have no visual experience whatsoever. It's all energetic, right?
Mhm.
Everybody that does journey work with us, like, they would say, wow, that was the most incredible thing that's ever happened. Even if they don't have, visuals or whatever, they clear stuff, they heal whatever. Now, some choose to continue to do the work and see it as a spiritual path. Some just kind of like get what they need, and they kind of check the box. Um, yeah, but there is a variety of experiences to have, some of which I say are purely energetic, and there's really no mind content. Like, some of which are very, as we know, kind of like 4 or 5D science fiction movies. I don't even know how to explain some of this stuff. I have
Mhm.
noticed a trend amongst folks that early on you tend to have a lot more of the visual, exciting stuff. What I would term of as kind of unicorns and rainbows. Just really, really bizarre experiences. And then as you further the work, it feels like it becomes to be more energetic. There's less of that content happening and more just, you know, your ever and ever subtler and finer energies, either being healed or else, kind of being upgraded.
Yeah, excellent. So, how would you advise someone on dealing with fear and any challenging moments that come up in an ayahuasca ceremony?
Yeah, so particularly the medicine, right? The sacrament ayahuasca is what people call shadow work. And what that is just really digging out all of those places within your energetic field where you have uh, blocked energies or negative emotions that you haven't processed. And those are, the ones: fear, shame, anger, bitterness, on and on. Any negative emotions. As humans, we're oftentimes wired to not feel these things, not feel these shadow energies for whatever reason. Like, it doesn't feel good, and so we learn very young to push them away and to compartmentalize them. Well,
Mhm.
you can get by with that up until your 20s and, maybe 30s, but by the time you hit middle age, by at 40, most folks are just full. Like, your system is just full of unprocessed stuff, and you just can't take anything else in, right? So, symptoms of that are if you're, like, super short with your family, your kids, your spouse, your work, you're feeling on the edge of kind of hysteria or crying or depression or whatever all the time. You're just full, right? And what this work can do is really empty you out. So the 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 mechanism one of the mechanisms of action is just re-experiencing, feeling all of these things that you didn't want to feel for some reason. Maybe there was sexual abuse, maybe, you were in a car accident, maybe you had a near-death experience, like whatever that is, and that stuff can be processed through your system, right? Feel it to release it, right? If you can feel it, you can release that out of your system, and that gives you more space then for more of your soul energy to come back in and to ensoul yourself even more. So the biggest feeling, I think, after ceremony is you just feel like you've lost about 100 pounds of a kind of dark energy, of dark feeling out of your system, and you feel like you have space now to actually metabolize all the things that are coming at you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I always just assure people that are doing this kind of work that everything and anything that comes up in ceremony is for your best, in your best interest, for your highest good ultimately. Even though sometimes in the moment
Yeah.
when Mother Ayahuasca might be showing you something that's bringing up fear or challenge or just dark feelings, whatever they may be. They just need to come up and be felt so they can be moved and released. And it's so powerful. And she might be showing you something that just doesn't make sense, like you were saying, like a jaguar or something scary that makes no sense, but it's intended to bring up a feeling in you that is ready to move. So it's not always necessarily about the imagery or making sense of what's coming up, but just really allowing those feelings to come up and to be moved. So,
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
And like this is challenging work, right? So any kind of shadow work is challenging. But it also trains you to actually directly face, like, the energy of this work is really to go in and through things, right? And you can see within your own self how you're just oftentimes going around. I'm dodging the issue. I'm going left. I'm going right. I'm going under. I'm going, I'm not just squaring up to the thing. Oh, this is a thing in my field. I feel great amount of shame over XYZ. I'm just going to feel that shame until it processes out of my system. And for all the reasons that we didn't want to feel it initially, the same are there. So you really have to, right? Right. This sacrament helps us to square up to that and just really feel it and release it. And that mechanism of just really facing the problems or the challenges energetically of your own feelings really translates into life to just like, no, just face life directly and metabolize it directly, feel it and release it. I know for in my own system, I just realized I wasn't feeling anything for the first 40 years of my life, or maybe for the first 5 as a kid I was, but I wasn't feeling this for a long time. So I had a backload of stuff, but I also just had to learn to feel again. I had to learn to feel it, open my heart to be like, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad. I can feel joy, I can feel love, but I can also feel, shame and anger and sadness and grief and all these things. So it teaches you to operate this energetic system, as a human, right, in a much better way. And most people that I have worked with in ceremony, everybody comes to ceremony. I think of it that like the average person maybe comes to ceremony like who's like 20% ensouled, so they're 80% kind of ego driven, 20% soul driven. And over time, you can slowly build up, more of your soul energy in your body through this process of making energetic space. And then, very mysterious, magical things happening in terms of your own system being upgraded. It feels like you begin to, once you clear everything out and you have this cleaning and healing happening, and then it feels like you grow a lot, like whether it's spiritual gifts or the ability to see energies, right? These are things that I didn't have when I started, but, I have now. Well, this came from clearing out all of this gunk in my system. And I think of it like getting an OS upgrade. Whenever you drop in, you get a move from Kev, 10.1 to Kev 10.2 or something. And that with hopefully with no bugs. Uh,
Yeah.
but initially doing the work and something else to like to tell people is whatever you're experiencing is coming from you, is coming from your field. Like if you're experiencing fear, the fear's not coming from outside of you, like the medicine, the sacrament's not putting fear inside of you. Like that is tucked away someplace. Really feel that fear. And fear doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel good. But this process, right, this energy, right, the sacrament allows you to square up to that and really feel it deeply and release it. And
Yeah.
it's a bit of a mysterious process how that whole thing works, but it's such a tremendous way to heal yourself and ultimately to feel better.
Absolutely, and it is so worth it. It may not feel like it in the moment sometimes, but it's so worth it. And
Yeah.
yes, the experience also does give us access to these higher states of being and bliss and beauty and open-heartedness and love, but often that comes after we've started to move and release some of the things
Yeah.
that are ready to move in us. So let's move on and talk a little bit about, afterglow and after the experience integration. How do you advise your participants to sustain and integrate their newfound insights, their healings, their wisdom, etc., into their daily lives?
Yeah. So I like to talk about boomerangs and blessings. So oftentimes you have this tremendous energetic release. It is like kind of energetic surgery. It can be as serious as that, as an actual surgery. Like it's dramatic shifts to your energy field. So you roll out of ceremony. So you do a weekend of ceremony, you roll out, and then you're oftentimes faced with, you see immediate changes oftentimes, And I think of it as the boomerang and blessing, right? So a blessing is obvious. Let's say you have been estranged from your mother for, 10 years. Like, it's not uncommon, you may roll out a ceremony and then Tuesday, out of the blue, they reach out to you, wanting to mend something, right? That's a real blessing in your life. Or you're stuck at work and all of a sudden that pathway clears for you and you're like, oh, life is getting easier for me somehow. It's a blessing. Boomerangs are when whatever energies you're releasing, and I like it in my own field to like kind of road rage, let's say. So everyone experiences a little bit of road rage, but I was certainly experiencing it living in the Bay Area. And I was like, this is just negative energy in my system. Why am I road ragey? And then, I would through ceremony be able to clear this energy out. And then sure enough, I would leave ceremony and I would be confronted with, the minivan going 25 in the fast lane. I could feel this energy coming up. And what Mother Ayahuasca was showing me was just like, hey, you now have a better way of dealing with this energy. It's going to come up, you're still a human being. But now process it through your heart and just release it. And don't let it go into your mind, right? Don't let it start to run the narrative. Like relax and release, relax and release. So this is an example of a boomerang, right? Whatever you're releasing, oftentimes things you're releasing in ceremony, like you still have to do the work, right? She can show you the way, but you still have to do the work of your own consciousness to create a new pattern of how you're interacting and being with things. So we have these two things, blessings and boomerangs. And I say, just watch out for these things. And then over time, what you realize is the blessing and the boomerang, they're really the same thing, right? They're two sides of the same coin. They're both showing you this is a better way of being a human in this reality. And the things you experience in ceremony, the love, the expansive feelings, the loving awareness, all these things, the compassion, the kindness, you can actually live that way in the real world, right? In the unreal world, the human world. But it takes effort, right? It takes effort on your part to actually do the work to evolve your consciousness. So combination of being aware of the boomerangs, the blessings, and then really lean on the community that's around you, that's doing the work, right? That understands what's happening as a way of continuing the work, outside of ceremony.
Great. Yeah, thank you for all of that. And I can certainly vouch that Soul's ceremonies are beautifully held, beautifully orchestrated by Brother Kevin here, who is a very skilled, experienced facilitator, and you have an amazing team. So I look forward to participating with you again sometime in the
Yeah.
near future.
Always, always, always love being with you in the field there, Brother Anu. Always.
Thank you, brother. So I'd like to just start to wrap this up here and get a little bit more broadly, just generally about the spiritual path. And I usually ask all of my guests some similar questions to what I'm about to ask you. Um, and the first one is, are there any red flags that people should be aware of when exploring different spiritual paths, communities, teachings, or teachers? This is, of course, in keeping with the goal of Soul Unique, which is to help
Yeah.
people uncover, forge, and navigate their own personal spiritual paths, whatever that might be for them. And that doesn't necessarily have to include ayahuasca, of course.
Sure. Sure.
So, red flags for people to be aware of on the path.
Yeah. The first red flag to me is um, kind of like really be attuned to the leadership and what's the cosmology, like what's going on with the group. Are they all about uh like to me, like what we say is we're trying to help you find the guru within. Like, I'm not a guru, or I'm just a guy who's done this work. I'm assisting, I'm facilitating the process, right? But the only special answers I have are answers that I have been able to figure out through my own work, right? My own spiritual work. So I'm here to assist. I'm here to help, right? I'm here to offer. Perhaps I'm a little further down the path of this type of work than others are, and I'm happy to assist them doing that. But I am, certainly not the guru. So anytime you're in a situation where it feels like the leader or the leadership is doing it for kind of egoic, like accruing power to themselves, or getting between, you and your own direct experience, that's a real red flag to me. People often ask, are you guys a cult? I'm like, no, like we're trying to facilitate you, right? You becoming, you finding your own inner guru, and we're trying to step out as much as possible. So our any kind of rules and regulations or process we have are for safety, right? And to help that process happen. But ultimately, we are here to help you to awaken to your divine nature. And there's nothing that gets between that. Like, that is you have to wake yourself up. We are here to help. So any other thing that's going on with a lot of dogma, a lot of belief, I think is not helpful. So I'd say just look for direct experience and look for safe containers where people have experience and they have some idea about what they're doing and what they're trying to help you to do.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's so important that people are given some tools by which to help navigate, like, and make choices, good choices, wise choices about who they'll work with or what path they're going to go down. So,
And there might be, I mean, opportunity to talk here about doing work in the States versus doing work down in Central South America. And obviously, I first started doing work down in Peru, and that's where this work originated. That's where, right, this sacrament is from. Um, Now, the West, people of the West, we grew up in this culture that's very different from the indigenous cultures. And I think that what we're trying to do is to create, and this doesn't come out of my head, right? This comes from, right, instructions from Mother Ayahuasca around creating the experience that helps to deal with the challenges, kind of the maladies of Western people. And broadly speaking, you think about the chakra system, in the West, we're just not embodied. Our lower chakras from the heart on down are oftentimes not functioning that well. And these are the chakras that ground you into your body and ground you to this reality. Um, our upper chakras, for whatever reason, are actually, we're very mindful, kind of thoughtful culture. So the upper chakras are actually operate pretty good. It feels like the reverse is true about the indigenous societies. Like that they're super grounded people from the heart down, and they're using the medicine to get up and out. Well, we're using the medicine to kind of go in and down, to ground ourselves, to ensoul ourselves, to enhearten ourselves. So whether, wherever you're doing the work, just keep that in mind. And I think you're going to see an increasing number of Western churches like us, who are really focused on how to use the blessings in this amazing sacrament uh, in a way that really is attuned and to the Western mind, the Western sensibilities, the Western culture.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, as you know, I've been working with ayahuasca since 2007, and I really truly believe, based on what Mother Ayahuasca and my experiences in ceremony have shared or shown me, that Mother Ayahuasca's goal, and the goal perhaps
Yeah.
of this kind of work, is to, as I always say, wrap her loving arms around the planet and move into all cultures around the planet. And of course, it makes sense that in order to be in other cultures different than the one that it began in down in South America, it needs to be assimilated into those cultures in ways that make sense.
Mm.
So, I think, there can be great value in going to South America or even Central America to do this kind of work. But for some people, it can be, it adds a layer of culture shock that is maybe not necessary. So,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful that there's so many different options now for people, but it also means that there are some options that may not be so good for some, or that there's some facilitators out there that aren't facilitating ceremonies with integrity and depth and clarity and safety, and really need to be careful, whether it's South America or here in the States, with about, who you choose to work with. So thank you.
For sure. Yeah, and take it seriously. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of your listeners do, but this is a serious. I'm reminded often that it's a serious business. Like you are brushing up against some very fundamental energies of your soul and of your humanness, and you want to just treat that with the respect uh, and the seriousness, for which it calls for. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so here's a little fun question for you.
Yeah.
What
Question.
what are your all-time favorite spiritually oriented books or self-help books, or,
Sure. But good question. So I will actually really like as a contemporary spiritual teacher, not even a medicine teacher, is Michael Sanger and his couple books, Untethered Soul, and his other book called Surrender Experience. And he may have some other books.
The Surrender Experiment.
Surrender
Yeah.
Experiment, rather, yeah.
Yeah.
Those two are probably ones that in the last decade I probably have gotten the most out of. But I should say that, I used to, I just moved recently from the Bay Area to Seattle, and I probably had like, I don't know, hundreds of books, a lot of which were spiritual books. And since I've been doing this work, having this direct experience, right? I don't think I've cracked, I don't think cracked many of those very often.
Hmm.
So, I found generally my reading of the self-help variety has just plummeted, to nearly non-existent because, I'm in the field a lot and I now have I have the pathway to my higher truth, And of course, it's always helpful to get other masters and get their perspectives, but, I find that, I'm more accessing my own inner guru now, which
Yeah.
maybe it's just where I'm at.
You've got direct access thanks to Mother
Correct.
Ayahuasca.
Access, and we all do. I was just and we all do. That's the thing, like, we
Yes.
all do. So, different, wherever you are in your path, certainly different things can help. And I'm also a believer that those things that you need will be, if you're sincerely trying to evolve your consciousness along with, on a spiritual path, you'll call into your field those things that you need to evolve. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I love you touched on earlier how, you're starting to like see energies and those kinds of things. And these could be called, clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, claircognizance. And it's not like I just would like to make the distinction that at least from my perspective, it's not like we're given these abilities. It's that we're opening up to these abilities that we all have and that are natural parts of being a temporarily embodied or a soul that's temporarily embodied in a physical body, and these are all natural, again, natural abilities that we all have, and this kind of work opens us up to realizing them. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
for
just
sure. Yeah, and your soul, we tend to think of these little human lives of whatever 80 years, start and finish, but, arguably, again, this is my own belief or what I've kind of run across in the field, but, we've been circling around for many, 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 many lives, and so your soul is picking up experiences, and your the suit of clothes you're changing and the human form or whatever form you're taking is changing, but the soul is accruing this stuff. So if you're showing up here, if you're listening to the Soul Unique podcast, if you've gotten this far in the podcast and still listening, then your soul is at a place when you're really wanting to, even if the ego doesn't want to, like your soul oftentimes is starting to push you towards evolving yourself, pushing you towards taking the steps, necessary to do that. So keep
yeah,
that. That's like if you're to your listeners, you're on the path, you're ready to go. Your
absolutely, yes,
souls are ripe.
yes. Bring it on,
Bring it up.
universe. So, one last quick question, another kind of fun one. What's a simple but powerful practice someone could do today, perhaps even after they listen to this, to feel more spiritually aligned or perhaps more aligned with their own inner guidance?
Yeah, so I do daily, if not a couple times a day, I basically ping all my chakras. So the chakra system, and this didn't emerge out of a teaching. This emerged just out of energetic healing. I kept realizing I'm just putting my hands in the same places all the time on people, and those happen to be kind of the 7 main chakras, as defined, I guess, coming out of the Hindu system. But so really just settling in. I've come to understand that all of these chakras are really the way that your soul kind of instantiates into this physical reality. So if any of these chakras are not working properly, you're not getting, that piece of your soul is basically not animating in this reality. And so in my own life, I found if my root chakra is closed, I'll feel very anxious because the root chakra is what grounds you here. It's the lowest chakra. And the general sense of the root chakra is it's all going to be okay, right? It's all going to be okay. Well, if your root chakra is closed, the mind has to figure that out. The mind is trying to create some contingency plan for how you're going to be okay, which just makes you more not okay, right? So if I start to feel anxious, I'm like, oh, my root chakra is probably closed. So just by giving your attention to your chakra system, with the intention of opening them up and flowing energy, I just go up from my root to my second, my third, my heart, my throat, my third eye, my crown, sometimes above the next chakra up. And I just make sure I spend some time and just open these things up. Sometimes there may be some messaging for me. There may be some emotions or feelings I haven't felt coming from the chakra. And so you can just do it in a couple of minutes of just really try to open up your chakras. I just go up and down a couple of times. And that can
Mm.
greatly help me to center myself, to ground myself, and to become more fully present. And like I say, you could do it sitting in, at the stoplight or something. That maybe don't recommend it. Unless the guy, behind you will honk you to get you going, which is certainly not good enough for me. But yeah, you can do it anytime. And if you're even feeling, disembodied, you're feeling like you're coming out of your body, you're feeling like you're not grounded, you're feeling, like I say, depressed. If I start to feel depressed, I know my heart is closed, right? That's a signal for me. So then I spend some time opening my heart up, and then I can metabolize that. I start to feel good again. So, if I feel like esteem issues, right? If I feel some issues around that, boom, third chakra issue, right? I can work on my third chakra. If I'm feeling lethargic, right? I have no life energy, no desire, second chakra issue. So that's the way that I tune myself up. And like everybody else, I forget about it once in a while, but I always come back to it.
I love it. Thank you. The reality of the chakra system, or our energetic system, is real. It's a real thing, and certainly my work with Mama Ayahuasca has shown me that, and I love how you articulate it and
Mhm.
have such great experience with your own system as well as helping others with theirs. So thank you so much, Brother Kevin. This has been awesome to not only talk with you, but of course to have you here on the Soul Unique podcast, which continues to grow, which is so exciting and wonderful for me, and I hope is for my listeners
Yeah.
and people like you. Yeah.
Oh, honestly,
So
it's been a real blessing and an honor to be here. And I just love to see your growth and how you've really doubled down on this work, and doing this work on Soul Unique is beautiful. So keep it up. I love it.
thank you so much. Thank you, brother. So I wish you highest vibes and blessings as you continue your beautiful and important work in truly being an agent of healing and transformation for our rapidly evolving world. Thank you. Thank you.
Blessings.
Well, that was a great conversation full of inspiring golden nuggets of inspiration and information from my good friend, Kevin Dodson. So grateful to him for joining me today. And I hope you found our conversation inspiring and helpful for you in navigating your own journey. For more information about Kevin and his work as an ayahuasca shaman with Souls Church, you can visit souls.church. That's SOULS.church. And as always, it is my intention to make the resources and information that were mentioned today in this episode as easy as possible for you to track down. I'll be posting as many as possible of the resources, concepts, and methodologies that were mentioned in our conversation on the soulunique.com website, so you can check them out if you'd like. And it's my intent, as the Soul Unique podcast continues to grow and expand, to turn the soulunique.com website into a rich library of useful and inspiring information and resources that can help assist you in uncovering, forging, and navigating your own personal spiritual path. If you'd like to join me on this journey, I encourage you to sign up for my Soul Unique mailing list at soulunique.com, and I'll keep you up to date on new episodes, inspiration for your unfolding path, and other resources. Lastly, I'd just like to add a quick plug here that if you appreciated and resonated with this episode, I will be forever grateful and honored if you would please like, follow, and maybe even write a short comment about the episode on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. It helps tremendously in spreading the good vibes about forging a personal spiritual path, as well as about this new and continually evolving podcast. So thank you for your consideration, and thank you very much for listening today. I hope you'll continue to tune in to the Soul Unique podcast in the future, and I'm wishing you well and sending you highest vibes as you continue to navigate your life, and yes, perhaps even your own personal spiritual path. Thank you for being here.